The Naruto series should have been longer. Now, you may think I am insane when I say this, because Naruto was plenty long, am I right? But I'm more specifically referring to the Naruto manga, not the anime, because the anime was obviously bogged down by several unnecessary flashbacks, filler episodes, and very slow scenes. But the Naruto manga is absolutely fast-paced. If you've never read the manga, first of all, you should, because it's way better than the anime, but second of all, you would be surprised with the amount of things that happen so quickly. And this is not a bad thing whatsoever. Naruto being fast-paced is one of the reasons why the manga was so popular in the first place. The way Kishimoto interwove scenes together and different plot lines to make things move, and always keep that excitement in the audience, wanting to know what's going to happen next, was great. But even still, Naruto should have been a longer series in the manga. And you may say, 700 chapters, the amount of chapters in the Naruto series is enough, but no, it's not. There should have been more. And I'm going to be explaining why there should have been more chapters in the Naruto manga. The first thing people may say is that putting more chapters in the Naruto manga would make the pace slower. It seems intuitive to assume that a longer story will have a slower pacing than a fast story, but this is not how pacing actually works in storytelling. The number of chapters and episodes do not matter when it comes to pacing. It's how fast events and interesting things are happening in the story that will give you a feeling of slow or fast pacing. A manga could have 10 chapters and be extremely slow paced, while another manga could have 10,000 chapters and have really fast pace. It just depends on how the story is told, not the length in of itself. So adding more chapters into the Naruto manga wouldn't necessarily make it a slow-paced manga if the events in those extra chapters were interesting and were happening in a pacing that matched the original chapters that we already got. And yes, obviously hindsight is 20/20, so Kishimoto couldn't have known some things that eventually became very clear for the Naruto series, and other times he was kind of forced not to include more chapters, but I'm gonna get into that later. However, it's very clear that the Naruto series would have benefited from more chapters, and I'm gonna be explaining why here. Now, my biggest gripe with the Naruto series, and this is unforgivable to me, is the Kaguya/Zetsu plot twist reveal in the end of the war arc. I absolutely hate that part of the story, and I choose to ignore it. It's not canon, it's whatever. But after that, my biggest gripe with the Naruto series is simply wasted potential or unexplored potential along the way. The Naruto universe is actually very rich, but Kishimoto chooses to ignore some aspects of the world building and some characters to keep the pacing going, but having more chapters and even more arcs in the series would have made the story much greater. And you may argue that the Naruto anime does exactly that with filler episodes. I see a lot of people defending filler and saying that, oh, they actually do wonders for the Naruto world building and for side characters. But no, they don't, because they suck. Most Naruto fillers are unwatchable. And I know that watching bad stuff nowadays has become kind of a norm from so many bad TV shows and the like that are coming out and people are just accepting them as good. It's kind of insane. But if you compare the quote-unquote best filler arcs in the Naruto anime to the worst regular arcs, they are not even close. For example, the ones that are actually kind of watchable are the Sora arc, the Gurren arc, and Naruto Shippuden, that's pretty much it. The Utakata arc is absolute garbage, completely unwatchable, and the other fillers are absolutely inconsequential. They don't add anything to the story whatsoever. They just bog the pacing of the anime. And when the anime was coming out back in the day and I was watching it weekly, it sucked to have to go through all those filler episodes. It was one of the most annoying things. Also, everything after the final battle in the Valley of the End in Naruto Part 1 is filler as well, so that's like 3 entire filler seasons after Naruto and Sasuke fight, and you have to wait to Naruto Shippuden. You have to watch all those stupid fillers. That's really annoying. Luckily, nowadays we can skip that, and honestly, I haven't watched like 90% of those fillers in Part 1 anyway, so if the filler episodes were good, it wouldn't be that bad, obviously, but they are terrible. they do not come close to the quality of the original manga. First, because they cannot interfere with the canon events, you always have to reset the story back to the status quo. And second, because Kishimoto is not writing them, maybe he's giving a couple of bullet points to the studio's Piro so that they can write something that makes some sense, but it's not good. Adding more canon chapters into the manga would have made those side stories from other characters far more interesting. Because that way, these arcs would have been able to actually affect characters and the universe itself, and they would have been of far higher writing quality. But let's talk specifics here for a second. When would you put additional chapters or arcs in the Naruto series? Naruto Part 1 is very tightly written, and it's pretty much perfect shonen all around. However, there is space for an additional arc there, and I would argue this arc would have been pretty damn important for the story if it had happened. The first major arc of the Naruto series is the Land of Waves, and it's a great arc to start the series with. However, the problem is that right after that arc, we get the Chunin exams, but that's kinda sudden. Yes, Team 7 has gone through several missions in between those arcs, but they are low-level missions that we just see glimpses of, like Naruto's collecting trash from the river and capturing bad cats for old ladies. It's not very exciting stuff, it's very low-level ninja stuff. And that's fine, because that's what Team 7 was supposed to be doing when they were kids and fresh ninjas. The importance of the Land of Waves arc and that escort mission that Team 7 went on was to give a sense to the audience of what the Naruto world, the shinobi world, felt like. It's the more quote-unquote standard type of mission that ninjas in this world would participate. And outside of filler episodes, it's pretty much the only normal mission Naruto and the main characters go on. Well, of the ones we see, because the others we don't really see much of. After the Land of Waves, we get the Chunin exams, which is something very different. It's a trial to see if you're going to advance through the rankings. Then we get a search for the Hokage, where Jiraiya is taking Naruto into this very weird mission where Orochimaru is going to be an enemy, and this is something completely out of the ordinary because it's a legendary son you're going to fight against. Then you get the Sasuke retrieval mission, which I suppose you could say it's more normal-ish than the rest, but still, it's not something that encapsulates what most ninjas are gonna go through in this universe. And then in Naruto Shippuden, pretty much everything is either dealing with Orochimaru or with the Akatsuki. And then we got the major 4th Great Ninja War. So the only time we see Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, and even Kakashi going through a normal mission is in the Land of Waves. It's great, but we should have gotten more. Also, getting the Chunin exams, which is the trial to see if you're going to advance through the ninja rankings, in the second arc seems a little too soon to me. Now sure, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura not so much, but Naruto and Sasuke had developed a lot in the Land of Waves arc, but I would argue that an arc in between the Land of Waves and the Chunin exams would have done a lot of good to the story. First of all, because we could get another arc where we could see a quote-unquote normal shinobi mission. Also because we could get more development between Sasuke and Naruto and their friendship, and maybe you could even introduce some characters that would be important in the Chunin exams, like the other rookie teams, Team Kurenai and Team Asuma, because let's be real here, Neji, Lee, and Gaara, out of the main characters, were the most important characters in the Chunin exams themselves. You could argue Shikamaru was also pretty damn important, and he was, but the rookies were certainly not the main side characters of the Chunin exams, so maybe giving them more screen time in this arc between the Chunin exams and the Land of Waves would have been really nice to develop them further. And if the arc is exciting, well-paced, and well-written, you wouldn't feel like the story is bogging down or anything. Other than that, Naruto Part 1 doesn't really need additional chapters, because it's pretty damn well written. And the reason why there isn't an arc in between the Land of Waves and the Chunin exams is because the editors wanted Kishimoto to move things along, and they wanted the story to have this quicker pacing. The editors believe that having a tournament arc would keep the excitement high, but in hindsight, it was a little bit too soon for a tournament arc in that point of the story. Especially the way the Naruto story was structured. The tournament arc should have been something that happened a little bit later when Naruto and Sasuke had developed a little more as ninjas. Still, it's not the end of the world that there isn't an arc in between those two arcs, but it is wasted potential, which is my second biggest gripe with the series. And yeah, other than that, Naruto Part 1 doesn't really need anything else. It's pretty much perfect. Now, moving on to Naruto Shippuden, there are more problems with this part of the story. Now, there isn't anything terrible in Naruto Shippuden, assuming Kaguya doesn't exist, obviously. The problem is indeed wasted potential, and it's much more glaring here because people complain about it all the time. The problem with Naruto Shippuden is how much it sidelined side characters, and very important side characters at that. Especially the characters from the Konoha 12, well, excluding Naruto and Sasuke, obviously. But think about this for a second. Neji, Rock Lee, they had amazing arcs and development in Naruto Part 1. Even characters like Kiba and Choji got very interesting development in the final arc of Naruto Part 1, the Sasuke retrieval, and they pretty much disappear. I mean, if you talk about Hinata, Ino, and even Sakura, the female characters from the Konoha 12, they are kinda not even in the story. Sakura a little bit less, but Ino and Tenten, they don't do anything. Hinata, she has a bit of a scene there with Naruto when he is pinned down by pain, but that's the only moment she really gets to shine in the series. The only character from the Konoha 12 that gets a satisfactory arc and development in Naruto Shippuden is Shikamaru with the entire Hidan and Asuma stuff. That's great, but he is the only one. That sounds a little bit crazy to me, doesn't it? And I know most Naruto fans share this sentiment. They wanted those characters to have more development, especially Rock Lee and Neji. I mean, when Neji dies in the war arc, we kind of forgot he even existed. That's one of the reasons why his death sucks, because we didn't really care about Neji for 500 chapters. So, like, when he dies, it's empty. Now, Kishimoto tries to include the side characters from the Konoha 12 in Naruto Shippuden. He includes one team per arc until the Pain arc, with the exception of the Tenchi Bridge arc, which he actually added Sai and Yamato as new characters. But in the Kazekage Rescue arc, he brings in Team Guy. In the Akatsuki Suppression arc, aka the Kakuzu and Hidan arc, he brings in Team Asuma. And in the Itachi Pursuit arc, he brings Team Kurenai. So technically, all the side characters got a little bit of time to shine, didn't they? Well, in theory, this is great and all, but those things they did were useless. They don't really do anything very impactful aside from Shikamaru in all these arcs. I mean, Team Guy in the Kazekage Rescue arc, they were only fighting against their own doppelgangers in the most boring fights ever. Choji and Ino didn't do anything to help in the fight against Kakuzu, and obviously I'm exaggerating here, they did some things here and there, but they did not get decent development. And then Hinata, Shikamaru, and Shino in the Itachi Pursuit arc, they don't do anything at all. And the worst thing is, the Pain arc was supposed to be the arc where everybody from the Leaf Village had time to shine, but first of all, Team Guy wasn't even in the village. And I understand that. Guy couldn't be in the village because then Pain would just lose, but you could just take Guy out of the village for a mission and keep the other members of his team in there. Ino does a couple of things in the arc, but not a lot. Shino just stands around and quote-unquote fights Conan, but it's off-screen, so what gives? Tenta never beat a single opponent, except for Kakuzu in the war arc, because Kakuzu's absolute fodder. But yeah, what I'm saying here is not news for anybody that's watched the Red Naruto, but the way to solve this problem is more complex than it looks. Now, you could have given those characters more screen time during the arcs they actually participate in. Make Rock Lee and Neji more impactful in the Kazekage Rescue mission. Make Choji and Ino more impactful in the fight against Hidan and Kakuzu. Make Shino, Hinata, and Kiba more important in the Itachi Pursuit arc, but it's not as easy as you might think. Those arcs had to move at a certain pacing, and if you gave those characters a lot of fights and a lot of scenes to participate in, well, you could have bogged the pacing down a little bit. Of course, if you were skilled enough, or if you cared enough, you could have certainly done that. After all, Kishimoto did exactly that in the Sasuke Pursuit arc, because that's, in my opinion at least, the best arc of the Naruto series, and it heavily featured several secondary characters. Neji, Shikamaru, Kiba, and even Choji felt very impactful and important in those arcs. Kishimoto also incorporated the Sand siblings in that arc, Rock Lee in that arc, and the villains were also amazing. I mean, I'm not even talking about Naruto and Sasuke, who are actually the main characters in the arc itself, but everybody else was great too. So Kishimoto can certainly do that. He can balance secondary characters with the main characters extremely well. It just feels like he didn't really care about doing so in Naruto Shippuden, and there kind of is a reason for that. In the end of the Sasuke retrieval arc, we see that Shikamaru's arc in that part of the story was to learn that being a leader was actually important, that people's lives were in his hands when he was the squad leader, and that he almost failed everybody. He actually failed the mission and people almost died, so that's cool and all. Shikamaru goes through that arc, and that arc gets further development in the Hidan fight and when Asuma dies and all that stuff. However, and this is actually confirmed, Kishimoto intended to kill Neji and Choji in the Sasuke retrieval arc, but he decided against it. Those two characters clearly don't have anything to do in Naruto Shippuden. I mean, I guess you could say Choji helped Kakashi a little bit in the fight against Pain, and Neji died in the arc, but he was going to kill them in Naruto Part 1, and that would have been very impactful, but then he decided against it because Kishimoto thought they would get more things to do in Naruto Shippuden. That clearly wasn't the case. So one of the reasons why these characters may feel a little lackluster in Naruto Shippuden is because Kishimoto didn't really have a plan for them after the Sasuke retrieval arc because they were supposed to die there. And a way to fix those things would be to add new arcs and episodes or slash chapters in the series that feature those characters and that actually develop them. Look at the Kakashi flashback arc, for example, which happens in the manga between Naruto Part 1 and Naruto Shippuden. It's that classic arc where Kakashi, Obito, and Rin goes on that mission. Obito gets, smashed by a rock, loses his body, but that's a pretty lengthy arc that features Kakashi and Obito. Now, obviously, this is not common in the Naruto series. Those flashback arcs are kind of rare. We see it here with Obito and Kakashi, and then we see it later in the arc when Hashirama's talking about his backstory with Madara and telling Sasuke about the village and the past and all that. And yes, the Kakashi Gaiden arc happened there because it would be kind of convoluted to tell it in the middle of the story because it's a lengthy story, and because of the importance Obito and Kakashi would have later in the arc, you had to tell that story beforehand. But nobody's complaining about that arc existing. It's a pretty good arc, it's fast-paced, and it doesn't really have a lot to do with the regular story. It's a flashback arc. Obviously, it becomes important, but it doesn't really progress the story forward. And yet, people like that arc. I mean, people don't like when the anime shoves in a billion flashbacks of Obito getting crushed by a rock. Well, that's besides the point. You could have done more arcs like that in the Naruto series, or you could even try to include arcs that follow the timeline in Naruto Shippuden as well, maybe in between the Akatsuki suppression arc and the Hebi Sasuke arc. And when it comes to exploring other characters and parts of the Naruto world, Kishimoto actually wanted to make a manga volume for every other major village in the verse. So he wanted to make a volume focusing on the sand, the mist, the stone, and the cloud villages, but the Shonen Jump editors thought this would bog the pacing of the story, and so they didn't allow Kishimoto to do that. It would have been very interesting to see how these other villages operated. I'm pretty sure these stories would have been pretty cool. Now, the only time the Naruto manga actually feels a little slow and things are not really moving forward is in the first day of the arc, that section of the story with Ginkaku and Kinkaku and the Hanzo versus Mifune fight. That was one of the not so great aspects of the Naruto story, but people tend to complain more than they should about the first day of the arc. Yes, in the anime there are more filler episodes than canon episodes for that particular part of the arc, and the arc in general, let's be real, but the first day of the arc lasts for about 35 chapters or so it's not so terrible. I mean, I would have done things completely different for that part of the story, but still, the pacing is not the main issue there. It's just that the events happening are not very interesting. Nobody cares about Ginkaku and Kinkaku. But the pacing is an issue in two specific instances of the Naruto manga, where things are actually rushed. And when I say rushed, it's because you feel like you're missing interesting developments because the story is moving too fast, which is different from being fast-paced. Because fast pacing is not the same thing as being rushed. Something can be fast-paced, but if you don't feel like you're losing development and interesting events of the story, then it's fine. But the problem is when things move too fast and they don't feel believable, or you feel like you're missing on very cool stuff. The first major example that I give here is the Kakuzu versus Naruto fight. The Akatsuki suppression arc overall is pretty good. The Kakashi versus Kakuzu fight is also pretty good, but when Naruto arrives at the scene and uses the Rasen Shuriken for the first time there to defeat Kakuzu, it feels absolutely rushed because Naruto does that way too easy. He defeats this guy that's supposed to be an extremely powerful Akatsuki member kind of easily, and in about 2 chapters, it doesn't feel very earned, and he uses just 3 shadow clones to fool the guy that's like 90 years old. Now, the reason why this part of the story is rushed is because Kishimoto was in the hospital. He wasn't doing so great when he was writing that particular part, and the Shonen Jump editors were just trying to make him move along the story and say, yeah, let's get over this arc, you know, Kishimoto, do it quickly. You're in the hospital, dude, let's make things fast here, okay? Just make Naruto beat this Kakuzu guy, whatever. It doesn't matter if he looks like a really trash character that loses to Tenten afterwards, it's fine. So obviously the Naruto versus Kakuzu fight should have been longer, the fight should have been much more difficult. And then there's another part of the story that was absolutely rushed as well, and it's essentially everything after the Kaguya fight. Now the problem with that part of the story, you know, when Naruto and Sasuke have their final confrontation in the Valley of the End, and they eventually reconcile, now the good stuff, is that Shonen Jump wanted Kishimoto to end Naruto at chapter 700. Why? I don't know, man, because I guess they thought 700, you know, having this very specific number to end your series on, you know, 700 would look neat. Because that's the only real thing I can think about, because it doesn't really make much sense. I mean, did they really want Boruto to come in so quickly that Kishimoto couldn't develop Naruto further? Because if that was a business strategy, it didn't work out whatsoever. Naruto was way more popular and profitable than Boruto ever, you know, could hope to be. And that's the reason why the Naruto vs Sasuke fight in the Valley of the End feels so rushed. I mean, it's still a pretty good fight, but it's like 5 chapters long, and this is supposed to be the final climactic battle of the entire 700 chapter series. And everything feels so rushed because the Kaguya fight ends, the war is over, and then immediately after that, Sasuke and Naruto, they have to fight. They have to go and fight. This is what has to happen because we have to end chapter 700. There is no falling action to the war arc whatsoever. Falling action is a very important concept in storytelling, that after the climax of a particular arc or story, you need some calmer chapters / episodes to make it feel like an earned story, an earned victory. Next time you watch a movie or read a book or anything really, pay attention to the climax of the story and when it happens. It's probably going to happen about 80 to 90% into the story, not 98% into the story. The other 20 to 10% that come after the climax are fallen action chapters / minutes in the movie. You don't end stories at the climax because it just feels wrong. You need some time to decompress, essentially. And the longer the story, the longer the fallen action should be. So when you take a look at the war arc, which is over 200 chapters long, you should have a decent amount of fallen action, probably 10 chapters or so, at least. And you only get 1. The only chapter of fallen action that includes the entire war arc and the Naruto vs Sasuke fight is chapter 699, which should have been the actual last chapter of the series, because the final chapter, chapter 700, is absolute garbage because it focuses on Boruto more than Naruto. It's an epilogue chapter, and I absolutely hate that chapter so much, but whatever. Having some falling action in that particular part of the story would have been very important, especially because this is the time where you could use some character development for relationships, for example, for how the world is working after such a major event, but we don't really get any information about that. We just had a 15-year time skip, and then Naruto has a child, or 2, whatever. And that's all because of Shonen Jump, and for whatever reason they wanted to end Naruto at chapter 700. I mean, I really don't get that, man. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Like the video, please. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Watch this other cool Naruto video right here, and thank you so much for watching.